Hi everyone, welcome back to Poetology. Today's video is how I wrote this poem video, and I'm going to talk about a poem I wrote in the summer titled Track Me Down. It was published in a zine after a 3-part workshop series that I did with Declan Whiffen on cruising the estuary. All of our contributions were put together into a DIY homemade zine, which you can download below by clicking on the link, and I will tell you a few things about how I put this poem together. I'm very interested in how people write, but it's also very difficult to explain how you produce a poem. So I'm going to take you through some of the inspirations for this poem. I didn't film the writing process per se, but I'm going to go through the notes that I have. I've already shown this writing journal before that I use, so some of the pages of that journal contain the first phrases and images that later became the poem Track Me Down. And of course I will also read the poem at the end. The writing workshop that I went to was a big inspiration for me. I don't tend to write very well during workshops, however. I'm not very good at writing on command in a specific setting. I much prefer being able to do it in my own time, and I do best with workshops that just give me inspiration and assignments, even for the following week. That's my favorite type of workshop. This one was a workshop where we wrote during the workshop. However, after the workshop we had weeks to come up with something that we wanted to submit, and that's the time when, for me, things came together. So that 3-week workshop was called Cruising the Estuary, and it was about cruising nature, wandering around aimlessly with a sort of desire, and it was about thinking of our relationship with the world around us, objects, other life forms, particularly around the Thames estuary. You can also check out an interview with Declan on the website Beyond Forms Creative Writing. I also took another workshop that was part of the medical humanities. It was a workshop with Polly Atkins that explored nature and disability, and this was very helpful because I was not able to go to the estuary itself to write this poem. Instead, I went to my garden and sometimes in the forest. I also became a little obsessed with tracking. It's something I really loved when I was a teenager. I went to the forest and I tried to find traces of animals. I lived in Switzerland, and in the winter there was a lot of snow, so that made it quite simple to find and follow tracks. And so this summer, because I couldn't walk as much and as far as I wanted to because of health issues, I decided to spend more time looking at details. And I got this book, Track and Signs, and became quite obsessed with it, and also with a more quiet, meditative attitude towards scientific research. I was looking at Hannah Hinchman, and for example this book, A Life in Hand, has a way of walking slowly through the landscape and looking at details and documenting what you see. So for me it's a long process of gathering clues, gathering ideas, gathering words until I have enough material for them to come together. I also like to follow Queer Nature on Instagram, and I love their website. That's a lot like the workshop Cruising the Estuary in the sense that it takes together queer methodologies and a queer outlook and applies it to nature observation and people's relationship with nature. Queer Nature is also inspired by indigenous methodologies. Now, if you look at the notes that I took in my writing journal, at first they are very simple, they are maybe not very deep, they can contain some cliches. I'm just trying to jot down things that come to mind around nature, around tracking. So I was writing a few things down, looking at books, getting some ideas. Later on, you can see some kind of leap at some point where what becomes the poem is starting to take shape. So you get more specific images and more unusual phrases to describe them. And that's where it becomes more than just a few very vague ideas and notes. So in a way, what I think is fascinating about this poem was that the process of writing was very much the same as tracking, in the sense that I was gathering signs and gathering traces and trying to see where they would lead. I really think this idea of seeing writing as tracking is fascinating, and I hope I can do something with it at some point, a workshop or something. I took some notes during the workshop, I took some notes after the workshop, and with time I started writing barefoot print between land and water, toes tasting the mud, sucking muck through my soles. Keeping a record of signs to decipher, webs, patterns, broken eggshells, furry dejections, pointing to the direction of travel, signs of meaning, trailing spirit, recording my own path through the brush and riverbank. We're starting to see more movement in my notes at this point, from just the idea of being present with the barefoot print to moving through the land. I also used Queer Nature's sigil on this page. Looking for clues is a form of cruising. Poetry is cruising. I am of two minds here, double vision sometimes. So exploring these ideas of cruising, of writing, of tracking. At Polly Atkin's workshop, we just listed some words that relate to nature. Tracks, traces, life, wandering paths, mountains, rivers, lakes, dust, wild, removed, inaccessible. And then there's this double page where things are starting to take off in an interesting way. The estuary traces a plucked feather, scent trail left by my soft underbelly, fur marks in the sand, a tuft caught by a fence post, stretched toe marks. And the title is Track Me Down at that point, so I coined the title that I was going to use. Follow me to the place where the soft marks come to an end. My toe pads, tiny feet, tiny tracks, textural changes, difference, soft, fur, smooth marks, scent marking, rubbing their belly, dragging it across, leaving messages of communication, information, shadow, ridges, projections. Later I have one called Tracking, this pattern of signs still fresh, a string of testimonies, the elusive imprint of warmth. And a page where things become very close to the final poem now. Creases in the sand, the imprint of fur, rubbing my soft underbelly, rubbing soft underbelly like a crease in the sand, the faint imprint of fur, a scent trail, paw patterns, etc. You see how I'm reusing the same images and trying to arrange them in different ways to see if I can find the right way of saying it and to see if a rhythm emerges that I can follow to structure the rest of the poem. At that point, I take my poem to my laptop and use a writing software. In this case, I used Rhyder. So here is the final poem. Track me down the scent trail where I rubbed tender paws in the mud, toes pressed down into soil, patterns of weight and movement, digging dusty ridges in the sand. See the faint imprint of fur from my soft underbelly dragging towards the bank. Where these delicate signs come to an end, I will leave dental marks on a piece of seaweed like Morse code, chew up a stained feather for you to twist between two fingers, let you sense the promise of my body's warmth ever ahead. In the final version, you can see that there's more of a narrative thread from the beginning to the end, where it's an invitation to be followed. I sometimes call it my sexy animal poem. It's this animal or person or form asking to be tracked down, knowing that they will never be caught, but playing with the tension between the passage of the creature through the land and the marks that the creature leaves, and knowing that someone might follow and read these marks. The zine that was put together has a lot of excellent work, and a lot of it is visual as well. There are collections of objects, words, pictures. It's well worth taking a look, and I really love the DIY feel of the zine. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing the process of writing a little bit more, and let me know if that's something you want to see more of. I'm happy to talk about how I write other poems, and maybe if I have it in mind while I'm writing the poem, which was not the case now, I will also document the stages, especially the final writing stage, in a little more detail. I'm going to be away for a couple of weeks, but I will come back, hopefully with exciting ideas for new videos, and I hope you have a great time in the meanwhile. See you soon. Bye.